Hi, this is Shazib Khan, and you are watching the YouTube channel of Pakistan's People-Led Disaster Management. Now, I am speaking here to raise awareness of a very serious threat that Pakistan faces. This year has been terrible. We have the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. It's never stopping. It's endless. We've had this locust invasion. Right now, it appears to be in remission, but it could come back anytime soon. And on top of this, we've had yet another bad monsoon season in which there's been severe flooding, especially in Sindh. But in addition to all this, a very big risk has emerged, and in the days ahead, it could result in a huge disaster coming suddenly. That risk is of a cyclone. Cyclones have historically not been a severe natural hazard for Pakistan. The Arabian Sea is not very active in terms of cyclone activity. Usually, one cyclone used to form in the Arabian Sea each year on average, and it often was not very powerful. And many of the cyclones did not strike Pakistan. So we were usually safe. But now, in recent years, due to climate change, cyclone activity in the Arabian Sea is intensifying. That is actually what has caused this locust upsurge, the desert locust upsurge in Africa and Asia. Starting in 2018, there was a slew of cyclones forming in the Arabian Sea and then hitting the Arabian Peninsula and East Africa, allowing for widespread breeding of locusts. And that has come to affect Pakistan as well. But Pakistan also needs to be cognizant of the chance of a cyclone directly impacting its shores, making landfall in its territory. 2019, last year, was the worst cyclone year for the Arabian Sea on record. 5 cyclones formed in the Arabian Sea, and many were powerful. That includes the biggest of them all. The biggest of them all was Cyclone Kyarr, which formed at the end of October, and it was a super-cyclonic storm, the first in the North Indian Ocean since Cyclone Gati in 2007. It was a monster storm, and even though it stayed well out to sea and dissipated, it still brought extensive coastal flooding to Pakistan. We were very lucky it did not hit us, but what if it did? That would have been a catastrophe, and such a catastrophe can occur any day now. 2020 was another strong year for cyclones, another year in which the Arabian Sea was acting out of bounds. Most recently, we've had Cyclone Gati in late November. It was a powerful storm. It intensified explosively. The most extreme 12-hour intensification of any cyclone in the Arabian Sea on record. And it struck Somalia, which is the first time in history that a storm of such strength made landfall in that country. So that just goes to show the Arabian Sea is not acting like it used to. It is bringing up all sorts of new surprises. Now that we are nearing the end of the year, cyclone season is pretty much over. It's very unlikely that there will be another major cyclone forming in the Arabian Sea in the thick of winter. So we should be safe, even under 2020 standards. But next year, 2021, the cyclone season will return in spring, and then the danger will come back. Pakistan has been very lucky that it's been spared cyclone impact those past 2 turbulent years, but our luck may run out next year, in spring before the monsoon season or later in the year after the monsoon season, which are the two times of the year that North Indian Ocean cyclones usually form. And if a cyclone impacts Pakistan, its effects will not be like those of previous cyclones, because now we have the coronavirus pandemic, which means that if a cyclone impacts a populated area, it will interact with the pandemic in such a way that the two hazards will multiply each other's effects. People will be forced to crowd into shelters, dense shelters, and the virus can spread like wildfire. The cyclone's destruction could completely break down our response to the pandemic. We won't be able to do lockdowns, and if vaccine distribution starts by then, vaccines distribution might become impossible, and our cold storage chain might entirely be destroyed. And even if a cyclone hits a remote area, a very sparsely inhabited area, it can still bring disaster to the country eventually by spurring locust breeding. There's still a lot of locusts breeding in Pakistan, and a cyclone impact will provide them a lot of rain, which could lead to a major plague, a major outbreak brewing inside our own country. And think of the people in Sindh who are still reeling from this year's monsoon flooding. If they don't recover by the time a cyclone comes, their vulnerability will be very high. The cyclone will be a double blow for them. It will continue their misery. So what Pakistan needs to do is needs to plan for this contingency. It needs to make cyclone preparation one of its top priorities. It must start doing so now, because the longer we have time to prepare, the better it will be at handling a cyclone. We need to think of every possibility, and we cannot rely on traditional planning because this is an unprecedented situation. Think of our worst case scenario. Imagine that another cyclone as big as Kyarr forms and it heads straight for Karachi, its center over the city, its eye over the city. There will be massive destruction in Karachi, a whole lot of people will die, and the city will just break down. It's already very disorganized, and it coped very poorly with this year's summer rainfall. It caused a lot of urban flooding because the drains could not be cleared. Imagine what a huge cyclone like Kyarr could do. There will be havoc in the city and the cyclone's outer bands, and when the inland movement of the cyclone, it will cause a lot of destruction, a lot of flooding and winds and storm surge all around Sindh, which means that the people who live there will be massive suffering for them, massive losses and massive casualties. This is something that could very well happen. It is quite a miracle that Kyarr did not strike Pakistan last year. It just turned to the west. But we now know that a storm like Kyarr is very likely to form, and other kinds of storms, very bad storms, could form and they could head for Pakistan. So we need to take that risk into account now, and we need to integrate our preparation for it with our management of all our other current crises and challenges. Thank you.